The small brain. I'm looking for some advice regarding my situation with my wife. Married 17 years and 2 young children. I am 49 and wife is 46. Very solid marriage up until a year ago. Wife's libido skyrocketed, which was great, but apparently I wasn't able to keep up, though we did and still have slept together multiple times a week. Another thing that changed is her drinking. She was a light drinker until a year ago, and now she drinks several days, nights a week. She also picks fights with me when drunk. Says I don't love her, I'm not attracted to her, and that I'm a poser, a fake. She'll say she hates me also when drunk. Never says these things sober. She also stated, while drunk, that she wants an open marriage so she can feel desired by a man again. She never brought that up again after that, though. Now, several months later, I suspect something going on. She frequently travels for business, and last trip she packed dirty pills and very dirty lingerie. She immediately put the lingerie and dirty pills back. She didn't use the pills, I guess, and left everything else from her luggage laying there. And I know that at least one piece of lingerie that was new was worn on that trip. She has also been texting and calling this older guy and deleting the texts and calls. She never deletes anything usually. I only saw a brief text exchange, and there was nothing physical except he had sent an emoji blowing a heart kiss. Clearly the previous texts were deleted. Lastly, she sometimes doesn't come home until very late or even the next morning from work events that I know do not go that late. I have not confronted her because I'm in eyes open, mouth shut phase and don't want to tip her off until I find out what is going on. I hate to be the type to snoop or put a tracking device on her, but I feel that's the only way I'll get answers. Any advice would be helpful. Perhaps I'm overreacting. It also seems like a midlife crisis thing. She's gotten in great shape at the gym, we both have, and shopping and getting hair done a lot. I hit a VAR in her vehicle last Thursday night. Before I even listened to anything on it, I confronted my wife with everything I had. She swore up and down that she was not nor ever had cheated. She pulled up her texts and Telegram conversations with this guy she talks to, and there was nothing physical or romantic going back to April. Mostly just exchanges regarding politics, which I don't enjoy discussing, and some conspiracy type stuff. He did send some stupid heart and kiss emojis to her, but there were none from her to him. She claims she didn't purposely delete the exchanges and was very willing to retrieve them for me to see. She also said she brought lingerie and the dirty pills on her trip for herself. She also said she brought her toy and nobody else was involved. She has worn dirty lingerie for solo acts before, just never knew she'd taken on the road. She also said the 5 or 6 times she stayed out late she had drunk excessively and hung out with coworkers or folks she met at the events. I did retrieve the VAR yesterday, and she did not speak to this other guy at all Friday, at least not while in her vehicle. I did hear her conversation with her best friend where they discussed my accusations, and she reiterated to her friend how much she loved me and wouldn't betray me. I felt like a hump after hearing that and violating her privacy, but I had to know what was happening. I do still believe she has a problem with alcohol, and we discussed that also, and she is going to cut back a lot hopefully. I rarely touch alcohol myself, so it's no problem for me to abstain. At this point I have no choice but to believe her, but still keep an eye open and work with her to cut way back on the drinks. She did understand why I was suspicious when I brought up all the circumstances I had uncovered. She wasn't thrilled about me checking her phone behind her back, but stated she might have done the same if she were in my shoes. I didn't tell her about the VAR and will just keep that to myself. She also volunteered to take a lie detector test if that's what I needed to put any doubts to rest. I'm obviously very relieved, especially after the vast majority of responses on here were 100% convinced she was a cheater. And she may be, but it doesn't seem like it, and we will move forward working on our marriage. Thanks again to all who took the time to respond. As I stated, I am still suspicious and have kept the VAR in her vehicle since I first installed it. There has been nothing on it that points to an affair or another man involved. I purchased the VAR with cash. I may not be a master spy, but using cash for that purchase was the obvious choice. I still find the lingerie on a work trip to be highly suspicious, which is why I'm still monitoring her for the near future. I realize that there are probably millions of folks who cheated on their spouse and get away with it. It's certainly possible she has cheated and covered her tracks just enough to avoid definite proof. And if that's the case here, I'll have to just live with not knowing for certain and be more observant of her behavior. Unfortunately, she has a job where alcohol consumption is prevalent, as she goes to numerous galas and events where booze is free and there's plenty of it. She has cut way back the past 2 weeks since we discussed the problems it was causing. She recognized that it was becoming an issue, so I'm very happy to see her controlling her drinking recently. So, nothing new has happened. I realize my suspicions may have caused her to cool her heels or be more careful if there is another man, but I'll be keeping my eyes and ears open for a long time before I feel completely comfortable. The silence in the car is a stark contrast to the cacophony of thoughts racing in my head as I drive aimlessly through the night. The neon lights blur past, each one a stark reminder of the uncertainty that now colors my world. It's been weeks since the confrontation, weeks since I heard her voice echo through the VAR, a voice filled with love for me, yet here I am, still chasing ghosts. The gym sessions that we both committed to, the changes in her appearance, the nights out, they all seemed like the hallmarks of a midlife renaissance, a shared journey to rediscover ourselves. But now, they're mired in suspicion, tainted by the lingerie that's traveled more miles than it ever did in the intimacy of our bedroom. The VAR is still there, hidden beneath the layers of everyday life, a silent witness to the conversations held within the confines of her car. I listen, I analyze, and yet I find nothing but the mundane exchange of daily trivialities. It's both a relief and a torment. A relief that there's no evidence of deceit, a torment because the absence of proof doesn't equate to the presence of innocence. I've watched her cut back on the drinks, seen the effort it takes her to stay away from the lure of escapism that alcohol presents. I want to believe that this is her turning point, that our discussions have anchored her back to the reality of our life together, to the family we've built with love and patience over 17 long years. There's a part of me that wants to rip out the VAR, to throw it into the river and let the current carry away my doubts. But there's another part, the one that's been burned by half-truths and drunken confessions, that clings to it like a lifeline. It's this part of me that I despise, the one that doubts the woman I've loved, the one that questions the sincerity of her willingness to take a lie detector test. Is this what trust has come down to? A device hidden in a car and the willingness to submit to a machine that measures truth through physiological responses. The very thought makes me feel like I'm standing on the edge of an abyss, staring into the darkness of the unknown. As I drive through the night, the realization hits me, we are at a crossroads, not of paths, but of the very essence of our relationship. The trust we once had is now a house of cards, shaken by the whispers of infidelity and the specter of doubt. I must make a choice, to continue down this path of vigilance, to monitor her every move, or to take a leap of faith, to believe in the woman who stood before me with eyes full of pain and a heart full of apologies. In this quiet night, the decision unfolds within me, a quiet resolve taking shape. I'll remove the VAR, not because I've found the proof I needed, but because the cost of this vigilance is a price too high for my soul. I'll choose to trust, not blindly, but with the cautious optimism of a man who knows that love is a risk, a gamble against the odds of human frailty. We'll work on our marriage, rebuild it brick by brick, with the mortar of communication, understanding, and renewed commitment. The lingerie and the late nights will be conversations, not accusations. The alcohol will be a beast we tame together, recognizing its power to distort and destroy. And if, in the end, my trust is betrayed, if the whispers become shouts that I can no longer ignore, I'll face that with the knowledge that I acted not out of fear, but out of hope. Hope for a marriage reborn from the ashes of doubt, hope for a partnership strengthened by the trials it has endured. So, I drive home, the decision made, the road ahead uncertain but no longer shrouded in the fog of suspicion. I'll face the dawn with a heart ready to mend, to forgive, and to embrace whatever comes, with my eyes wide open and my mouth no longer shut by the fear of what I might find. My comment: it seems to me that you and her need to have some frank, honest, and non-confrontational discussions. I think you need to let her know your feelings and that together, you need to establish boundaries and what the consequences of breaching those boundaries are. There are obviously some stress points in your marriage and perhaps communication or marriage counseling is in order. I am going to say this and you can take it as you want. Alcohol is a drug and it is responsible for a huge number of problems in society and marriages. The behavior you spoke about her engaging in when drinking, I see as problematic. I can tell you this, my wife has never tasted alcohol and I have only been drunk once in my life, after combat. I have not drunk in a very long time. Due to thins, we have never had alcohol-influenced fights, being ugly to each other or other things that happen when inhibitions are lifted. If you want to save your marriage, and it appears that you do, you must do the hard work to repair it. She will also have to do hard work. If you want to save your marriage, you have to be willing to lose it. Truth will always become known. It is better for you and her to face the truth and reality and figure out a way forward. A good marriage is one where both spouses feel safe in their relationship to each other. At the very least, and I understand I only have your side of the story, you no longer feel safe in your marriage. Story 2. I've been married now for almost 5 years, together for 7. In the first 3 years of our relationship, I did everything above and beyond for my husband because I wanted him to see how much I love him. I let down barriers that I never did in previous relationships, as well as my previous marriage, and was completely vulnerable, submissive. At some point my husband, we were dating at the time, wanted a dog, a bigger breed dog, and I agreed to it, but in the back of my mind I know it was a bad idea. I had 2 small children from a previous marriage and honestly, I was not educated on how to care for larger dogs and didn't do any research beforehand. But he convinced me this was his dream dog, and so I just trusted him and went with the flow. It was a nightmare. We got the dog as a puppy, but neither of us had the knowledge to properly train the dog, and when we had her evaluated by a specialist, he'd pretty much told us something was wrong with her. The mother bit her as a puppy and he said that was her way of eliminating the puppy. Anywho, my husband in my opinion didn't properly care for her, and I was growing aggravated by the day of the destruction she was causing to my home. It was starting to put a huge strain on our relationship when we had 0 problems before. The last straw came when the dog bit my then 6-year-old son. My husband was not home when the incident occurred and I did not witness it. I just heard my son scream in distress, and when I got to him, my son was laid on the floor in the fetal position with my daughter yelling that the dog had bitten him. From that point on, I wanted the dog out of my house. My husband tried to downplay the situation. Mind you, he was not there, and claimed that she was probably playing and got too rough. It ended with us separating, which really changed how I felt. Loved him. I felt like after everything I'd done for him up till that point meant nothing when he was letting me know he cared more about this dog. And I felt I was made to be when I was choosing my kid's safety. Eventually, he rehomed the dog, but it's still a sensitive topic for me. It's been 4 years, and I still think about it from time to time. We even argue every once in a while, because he feels I have changed and am not as emotionally connected, and I just want to scream. I wonder why. In the midst of all of that, we adopted a smaller dog, and we've had him for 5 years. He's old, and so we expect he only has a few more years life expectancy, and so for some reason the topic of dogs came up in a conversation between him and my daughter. He told her when our current dog passed, he planned on getting that same breed dog that he rehomed some years earlier. All those emotions started flooding back and we started to argue. It's a few days later and it's still on my mind. Like, why would he want to put our marriage through that again? I can't talk to him because I know it's just going to be an argument, but I'm finding myself distancing from him from just the thought of going through that all over again. I never said I didn't like dogs. In fact, most of my life I've owned a dog, just smaller ones. I didn't care for this dog because of its size, the destruction it was causing, and my husband's lack of responsibility towards the dog. The kids like the dog, and to this day will say they would have been okay if we kept her, but they are kids and I am the mother who is responsible for protecting her kids, and if anyone or anything threatens my kids' safety, they have to go, period. My children and I were in the picture years before the dog came along, so don't you think it broke my heart a little more that he was more concerned of keeping the dog than keeping us? Dogs are great sometimes, but there has to be a line between the love you have for your dog and the love you have for your wife and kids. The trainer who came and evaluated her said he sensed something was wrong because the mother bit her as a pup. We never looked further into that. A few years later we had a baby together. She is 2 now. After he rehomed the dog, the family he gave her to rehomed her as well. I don't know the whole backstory, but a baby came into the picture and that wife wanted her gone as well. I was never directly hostile towards the dog, but after she bit my son, I stopped tending to her. She bit my child. I wanted nothing more to do with her because to me, she was a threat, and if I had it my way, she would have been removed from my home that same night. But I gave him the chance to find her a home. It was a mastiff, but whatever. We had marriage counseling through this whole ordeal, and the counselor basically told him, you need to rehome the dog, and after that he didn't want to do counseling anymore. He is a really good man. He reluctantly rehomed the dog, and a few years later we had a baby together, although that was also a fight. He's a father to my older kids and treats them just as his own. This was honestly the only issues that lingers in our relationship, and I wish he'd see that. When we argue because he feels like I don't want to be close to him, this situation comes right back to my mind. I don't want to hold on to this, but then how can I let it go when I know he wants to bring this type of dog, a mastiff, back to my home when he knows how I'll feel about it? Having a dog is like a luxury to me. It's something you get when you know it'll bring you joy. It won't bring me joy at all, but it's something he just wants me to tolerate. We did go to counseling while the dog was still in our home. The counselor basically told me, husband, your marriage takes priority, and if this dog is causing this much trouble that was not present before, then you need to rehome the dog. My husband didn't want to go to counseling anymore after that. The other night he said, you used to be so easygoing and laid back. I just want to tell him you changed me. I never made him chase me. In fact, I did the chasing, which years later I'm starting to regret. Don't get me wrong, my husband is a good man, he works hard. I never have an issue with him taking care of his family. There has never been any issues of infidelity, and never will be. My husband doesn't have the heart to step out on me or his family, which I love about him. He makes sure I know exactly where he is and checks in with me even when I act annoyed that he's calling to check in. This was the issue that changed our relationship. I even feel like crying now remembering everything we went through over a dog. When I saw how much he wanted to fight for this dog, it made me feel worthless, and 4 years later it still does. And him talking about getting another one just brings all those emotions back. I did not witness it. My kids and the dog were downstairs, and I went upstairs to grab a basket of laundry to fold. I heard my son scream, and I literally jumped down 2 staircases to see him on the kitchen floor in the fetal position, and my daughter screaming that the dog bit him. My son knows no fear, so to see him like that, I knew something happened. On his face were 2 scratches, so my husband was saying the dog probably jumped up on him. At the time my son was 6, weighed 60 pounds, and the dog weighed 90 pounds and grazed him or something. I don't know, he just kept arguing that she did it with him but was just playing. The dog hurt my son, period. I wanted to be transparent as saying that I didn't witness the ordeal, but whatever happened, it hurt him enough to scream bloody murder and crouch down in the fetal position in fear. That was enough for me. I say she bit him because the only witness, my daughter, says she did. Now if I overlooked it and it happened again, only this time the outcome being worse, I would be labeled a bad mother for allowing the dog to stay after she'd already hurt my child before. As I said before, I say she bit because the person who witnessed it till this day says that's what happened. Either way, the dog was fit to be around small children, and that's evident because the family he placed her with rehomed her as well. I just felt like I was caught between trying to be a good mother to my children or trying to make my husband happy, and there I was in the middle, miserable. I never want to go through that again. As I said before, I still think about 4 years later and wonder if our relationship would be better had that never happened. I have no desire at this point to have another dog, and I dread the day I will have to tell him that, and again I will be stuck with the decision to let him be happy or make me miserable. Some background about our relationship before you say I should have let him keep a dog that came into the picture well after my children and I established a family with him. It would have been different if this were a dog he had before us, such as in your scenario. My husband and I are in the same profession, but when we met, I was 4 years into my career and he was still in school. Being that I did not have a great support system from my ex while I was in school, I went above and beyond for him because that's the love I'd wanted. So, I did all the cooking, all the cleaning, paid all the bills. He offered to chip in financially, but I said no because I knew he was making much money at the time, and again I was expressed a love language to him that I wish was expressed to me. All he had to do was go to work, school, and study. I did everything else, including tending to my own children. But of course, he was present in the home and has always been great to them. Putting the love of children on the same level as the love you show a pet is a trigger for me. I don't think it's right. I've owned smaller breed dogs pretty much my whole life and I have one now, but if it ever came down between my children and my dog, it's never a question that my children and honestly any child that is in my sight for the moment or long-term dominates over mine or any other dog. I say that because I once had a coworker whom told me a story about when she was in a situation and had to make a split decision to either save a child whom was a stranger to her, or a dog of 12 years, and like a compassionate human she picked the child, though it hurt her deeply that she lost her dog. So, my point being, I took care of him until we were married, as a way of showing him how much I love him. So, I don't feel like him being there for my children who aren't biologically his went above and beyond what I did, and therefore I should have just put up with the situation when no solutions were being made after I gave him 3 different chances to fix it. The dog putting fear in my young child was the last straw. I'm a mother above anything else. So, we haven't really talked about it. In fact, I try to avoid it because it just brings back all those feelings of being hurt and feeling worthless, which then affects the way I treat him. A couple of days ago, him and my oldest daughter were casually talking about dogs, and he said, "When your sister is about 8 years, I'm going to get a Mastiff." It immediately upset me, and we kind of argued. I basically told him he wasn't responsible enough to take care of that type of dog. I didn't want the destruction to my home, and since we're putting in an in-ground pool, we wouldn't have the yard for it, and I don't want to pick up dog poop because I know he's not going to do, which would also piss me off and make me not want to own the dog. His defense was he wouldn't be in school this time around. Him and the children would take turns cleaning up after the dog, and the specific breed was lazy and low maintenance. I rolled my eyes and walked away from the conversation, and we haven't spoken about it since. He comments, "Now that I don't love dogs the way I used to, I wonder why. I went through an experience with a dog that almost cost me my marriage. So why would he think it'd be a good idea bringing this type of dog back into the picture?" The problem is my husband loves the idea of having this dog but doesn't want to put in the work it takes to care for it and gets mad when I call him out on that. I should have let him keep this dog because he was being a father to children who weren't biologically his. Does that mean that if my children were biologically his, then the situation could have been different? I ask because his brother pretty much said the same thing, yet when him and his wife had a baby, he rehomed his large dog that he had for years prior to them getting married because the dog only showed signs of aggression. So, are my children less valuable because they aren't biologically his, and I should feel obliged to put my kids' safety at risk? He claims he will take care of the dog, but I know my husband and he won't do it to my standards. By nature, I'm a very clean person and I prefer my house being clean at all times. My husband is the opposite. So, when I say you need to pick up the dog poop, I mean you need to go outside after the dog comes in and pick up the dog poop. He will pick it up once a week after I nag at him to do so and will claim I do a good job picking up the dog poop. How much training did your husband do with this dog? He walks it at least once a day. No walking, no training. He took her to a once-a-week program for an hour at a time at a humane society, and he stopped doing that after a few weeks. I went to one session and could see she was not making any improvement. Around 6 to 8 weeks. She was a puppy. She had a wound on her head, and when I asked about it, husband casually told me. I didn't go inside with him to get her. She was bitten by the mother and the breeder kept her in a separate pen after that. The breeder was horrible. She was covered in bugs and worms. I'm the one whom got up early the next morning to take her to the vet because he didn't feel like it and wanted to put it off. And that was before we were married, by the way. He just wants the status of owning that type of dog, not the responsibility. He only paid $500 for her. That was a red flag. It was literally a rundown trailer. I didn't want to go inside because it looked disgusting and my gut sank when he sat her in my lap, but he was so excited and I didn't want to ruin that moment for him. Even with the small dog we have now, I take care of the grown-up duties, vet, grooming, while he just makes sure he gets outside and has food, etc. He's a low-maintenance dog, which is more suitable for our family, and he doesn't do well on walks, so he gets to run around outside whenever he wants. The only complaint I have about our current dog is he sheds a lot. But I know if he were more maintenance, my husband wouldn't be the one taking care of him. It would all fall on me. My comment: you should tell him in a quiet setting. Let him know you want to be prioritized as well. A milder video for today after yesterday's stories. Go check them out if you haven't. Hit that sub, and I'll be back with more soon.